Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar. We're going to today be talking about how we can be helping local authorities to stay cyber assured. There's a little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you've got any questions, please pop them into the question box, and we'll deal with those towards the end of the presentation. And there's also a short survey at the end, which kind of helps us to make sure that we get these right as we kind of go forward. So that'd be great if you could give that some attention as we leave. In terms of introductions, I'm Chris Booth. I'm an account manager with ITHealth. I've been involved in health and social care IT now for some 25 years, and I'm going to take you through today's presentation. In terms of us as a business, we're involved in quite a wide range of things related to assurance, compliance, and IT security and cyber. These are some of the areas that we kind of work in on a day-to-day basis. We pride ourselves on our relationships with our customers and the level of support that we provide, and really makes the difference as far as we're concerned as a business in putting these products together into solutions. And so today we're going to focus on that compliance and assurance area. We do work with some leading vendors in the marketplace. On the screen there you see some of those that you probably recognize. I'm happy to talk to you about any of those should you want to, in addition to what we want to look at today. Just by way of kind of introduction and kind of set some kind of challenges for us, the NCSC released their 2020 review recently, last week actually, and a few things that kind of spoke to us as we kind of studied that document. And number one on there being that detecting and mitigating vulnerabilities is very high on the agenda for any organisation, and the line that we tend to use is if you connect it, protect it. And number two there, managing those legacy systems. Clearly there's a lot of legacy software out there, and getting visibility of that to make sure that you've got the right level of patching and it's all updated again, removing vulnerabilities is really important. And you know, one of the things that the NCSC are driving again is around that kind of piece around Cyber Essentials, which I'm going to come on to in a bit more detail. So three key things that kind of came out of that review quite recently, and we kind of keep in the backs of our minds as we kind of wander through. Turning to what goes on within local authority and health and social care, there are some common challenges that we see on a kind of day-to-day, week-by-week basis. And that, you know, I'm not going to read all these out. This session is being recorded, so you'll get a copy of that to kind of study in your own time. But again, just to call out a few things there, PSN is very important, and keeping that compliance is vital. And then, of course, we get all of these other bits that kind of come in around Cyber Essentials and common assessment frameworks, etc., etc. So there's quite a few things, but I'm going to cover some of these as we kind of wander through the presentation today. Take a look at assurance. What do we mean by assurance in an IT setting? And you know, it's about making a claim that we know that our network is secure, that we know everything about it, we know that what's on there and the visibility we have is truthful, and we're looking at the right things and making sure that things like vulnerabilities are managed. But also it fits into our wider corporate governance and how we provide our management teams with the right information that's accurate and truthful at any moment in time, so that we know that what's going on in the organisation is what we're saying is going on. And if we're asked a question at any moment in time, then we can answer that question. I was speaking to a customer yesterday who said that their manager was in a corporate governance meeting, and they received an email from that meeting from their manager at 11:03 asking a question about a particular set of assets. They were Windows assets, Microsoft Windows assets in this case. And by 11:06, they'd actually used what we call our assurance dashboard, which we're going to share with you, and they'd gone back with the relevant information they needed, so their boss could actually answer the questions in the meeting. And that's really what we're trying to drive to here, to make sure that you've got that information at your fingertips. We've got quite a few case studies now. I say a lot of this is vested around health and social care, and a couple of video case studies, which again we're happy to share with you from a couple of senior level people within organisations that we work with on a regular basis. Again, happy to share those with you. In terms of setting the scene around what we want to talk about and share with you around this solution, what we're looking at here is how do we get this holistic view of your IT estate, and how do we make sure that your level of cyber compliance is accurate and truthful. And one way to look at this is to take a view of this kind of spaghetti mess diagram here, which was shared with us from one of our customers a couple of years ago, and it's still true today, is the interrelationships between software, between hardware, between how these things are being used. And some of these tools in this table on the right hand side here that you'll be familiar with, I'm sure, whether it be tools around admin or management or particular tools around, let's say, antivirus or asset management, and how they all interrelate on a day-to-day basis. And of course, today, as we find ourselves, within this current scenario, we've got many more people working remotely, and that includes members of the IT team and those people who are meant to manage this and visibility of all of these assets. And a lot of this can be manually processed. So how do we automate it? How do we get full visibility of all these assets and make the right decisions on the things that we need to know about? And in addition to that, how do we manage that PSN compliance piece? How do we manage our NIS regulations? And how do we look at things like Cyber Essentials Plus? So as part of our work at ITHealth, we put a lot of effort in to try to match things. So here's a couple of examples for you. The NIS guide talks about the cyber assessment frameworks. We've looked at that document and we've come up with our own version of that document that says this is how this particular product and this solution will help you address some of those questions, give you answers that you can have your fingertips on. It's live information, or you can obviously report on that at the right time on a week-by-week or month-by-month basis. And then a particular one that's close to our hearts as well, we spend a lot of time, I say, in health and social care, and within the NHS is a good example. There's something called the DSPT, which I know does apply to other sectors as well, and that has got a real stringent way of saying there are certain things that you need to respond to and certain assurances that you need to make. And in that case, we've found out that 81% of that we can meet around cyber-related mandatory requirements with information direct from the dashboard. And again, very powerful. But at the same time, what we're trying to do is give you a tool that allows you to focus your resource on the right places at the right time. So again, this care cert piece is actually a healthcare specific one, but this is about automating processes. It's about automating vulnerabilities, which we're going to come on to. And I don't want to dwell on the healthcare side of things. It is a strong area of our kind of customer portfolio. But what we really want to get into is full visibility of all of your assets, whether it be Windows assets or non-Windows assets. What's going on around things like antivirus, ATP, encryption, vulnerabilities, and looking for endpoints that are maybe inactive or are out of date or disabled in some way, and bringing that to your attention very quickly so you can act upon it and apply the right resource. And again, back into this kind of area of what's going on around things like Cyber Essentials and NIS and 10 steps and kind of Cyber Guardian and that kind of thing. And again, bring it all into one place. This is a really important point because the organizations that you represent will be multifaceted. There'll be teams that will look after desktops or cyber or infrastructure or servers. And actually, if all of those parts of the organization are looking at the same core content, then when you kind of sit in that corporate governance environment, then everybody's got the same information, or they're coming to the same information sources, rather than bringing 5, 6, 10, 12 different versions of their truths, and then there've been a debate about what that looks like. This is all about getting that holistic view in terms of your assets and what you've got across your estate. Now, how do we do this? So the solution consists of a couple of key components. One is the live dashboard that's sitting on a server within your estate. We don't have any issues around covering over multiple domains or going over low bandwidth connectivity and things like that. We're using agentless scanning in this instance. We can apply an agent if required, but the bulk of it is agentless, and it's using industry standard tools to interact with those endpoints natively and bring information back with kind of iterative updates, and it's a very small amount of bandwidth that's required to do that. And we've got kind of approaching 100 customers, and we've not kind of seen any bandwidth issues across any of those, and they are over some very wide and distributed environments and very complicated networking. The live dashboard is collecting asset information. We then overlay that and compare that with vulnerabilities and other aspects, which I'm going to come on to and share with you in more detail. But it's much more than that, because you might want to have a very tailored approach. You might want to see some very specific reporting requirements that you want to see on a day-to-day basis, and again, that live information. You may want to create views for individual teams or individual stakeholders, as an example. And again, we get into that with you around the tailoring piece. And in addition to that, we also provide a monthly management report. That's designed as an executive-facing report, and that is then sent out via secure PDF to the nominated persons in the organization. And again, this is all about releasing resource, about applying the right resource to the right places within your organization and getting the job done in a timely manner, and then Again, this is a third-party review as well. So, you know, as part of things like CE+, the requirement is that things are reviewed from a third-party point of view. So again, that kind of sits in there and gives you that. And around all of that, we can schedule reports, we can set alerts against key things, and we'll see that as we kind of go through what the live dashboard looks like in a second. Just before we do that, some key things to think about, and these kind of tick these off as we go through. So we need to take a full hardware inventory of those assets. We need to take a full software inventory of those assets. We need to be looking at Windows update data. So we're taking feeds from Microsoft Security Center, looking to Active Directory to find out what's going on there, looking at network devices, then taking account of vulnerabilities, any particular areas of vulnerability reporting that's specific to your environment. We'll look at that as well. I mentioned care sets from a healthcare perspective, and then that management reporting piece. These are all key areas within the dashboard, which we're going to come on to now. So we're now seeing what the dashboard looks like. These are static views, but we will show you kind of how that works dynamically. And it's important to note that this isn't a static view. These are dynamic views. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the navigation and how it works, which is consistent across the whole solution as we go forwards. So looking at this view here, hopefully you can see my mouse moving. Apologies if it's a little bit slow. At the top here, we've got kind of these white URLs here. This is kind of all the configuration of the bonnet. We will do all of that for you. We'll talk to you about what that needs to look like, how we're going to scan, what kind of frequency we want to scan, let's say Windows devices, network devices, etc., and we'll build all that out. We'll also talk to you about what you want to see outside of these kind of standard views that we have got. And again, underneath all of this is a whole area that you can come into, and that training is provided as part of the solution over the term to ensure that you can kind of see what you need to see and do what you need to do. But we want you to rely on us. This is a solution that we deploy for you, and then we will kind of go through and help you to make sure it's giving you exactly what you need and take that kind of pressure off you to do that. Below that are these blue tabs, and these are the things I want to focus on today in terms of all the different areas that have been built out to give you instant one-click access to all this information across your estate. So again, just to reiterate and remind everybody, we're scanning the entire estate, we're bringing information back. We can subset that down. We've got some customers who just look at their Windows devices, right the way through to people looking at everything they've got on the network, whether it be a camera, a printer, whatever it may be, to make sure they've got full visibility of those of all of those assets. In terms of the way the dashboard works, it's quite straightforward. Anything that's in red needs your attention. Anything that's in blue is for information, and anything that's in grey over on the right hand side, you'll see is absolutely fine, and you'll see it's got zeros against it. And that logic goes all the way through the dashboard as we kind of progress through what we're going to show you. This current view that we're looking at is what we call our Windows assurance, and actually contains a lot of aspects of information around the things that are pertinent to looking at that Windows assurance and what's going on. So I'm going to explain those in a second, but I mentioned earlier this is dynamic. What we mean by that is that you can click these links and you can get directly into this information. Why? Because you probably want to remediate that information. You could have also set an alert against some of this. So let's say, as an example, we've set an alert on our dashboard to notify the relevant person that if we get any workstations where the antivirus is not there, we want to know about it. So it gives us an alert. We'll get that via an email. But what we can then do is we can then click through to find these 6 machines. And here there are those 6 machines that we know don't have an antivirus on. Now this is important because it now means that we can create a package, put it onto the dashboard server, and we can deploy that package. See up here, you see my mouse is moving here, deploy package. But more importantly than that, once we've done that, we can then rescan. And we rescan, and hopefully all those devices are then fixed. It may be that some of them are not fixed, and there may be a longer list. We can then drop down to that particular device and have a look at what's going on. Why is that AV update not taking place, etc., etc. And you'll see more labels here, which I'm going to come on to towards the end of the presentation in terms of more detail around these assets that we can get to. Also, a lot of tools on the left-hand side here that we can utilize as well for various things. A lot of the tool gets used for investigations, and I'll come on to some of those stories a little bit later. And then we can come back up. And hopefully, if those 6 devices have been remediated, this will now be 0, and this line would have turned grey. Again, we've got regular scans going on. Best practice suggests that we'll scan most Windows devices every 4 hours, and that cadence is good and right because that's helpful. But obviously, we can then relax that to a different cadence for other devices. You may feel that maybe, let's say, your firewalls are not as risky, and therefore we don't need to do them. And just for clarity, when I say we, this is a dashboard, again, just remind everybody, sitting on your network and providing the service for you. The only connectivity we have, unless it's a support question or for tailoring, is we have an automated connection in the background, which effectively is giving all the updates across the range of things that we're looking at, things like Windows updates or vulnerability updates. So let's get into this view a little bit more. So again, back in the Windows Assurance view here, I mentioned that we've got desktop antivirus. The solution is agnostic. It's not bothered about what assets, whether using a leading edge tool, maybe a Sophos, a McAfee, Trend, etc., or if you're in the kind of Microsoft Defender environment, that's not an issue. We'll make sure we get information out from there to give you that view. Workstation antivirus here disabled as an example in total numbers. Below that, ATP. Again, key components here about what's not working that may stop ATP working. And then below that here, drive encryption. Just called a couple of names out just for reference, BitLocker, McAfee, etc. So what's going on with the drive encryption? And then below that, a couple of graphs here, pie chart, sorry, which is the first glimpse that we get of what's going on with our Windows update status. So we've got desktops here, and to the right of it, servers. And as we flow up through the middle, information that's pertinent to what goes on around those Windows devices. So as an example, do we have devices where we have less than 10% drive space, or a physical amount of drive space? Or have we got servers not running? These are things that would stop an update taking place and therefore could render that device vulnerable. The top here, server antivirus, and then over on the right at the top, a high-level overview of Windows OS and service packs, and then below that, Active Directory. Interesting area this is in here because we might find that we've got users who are not using their devices. So where are those devices? Are they in a cupboard somewhere? Are they vulnerable? We also see things like failed logons called out, no user password called out, and then some additional information around AD. And then below that here, some key ones again, particularly around Server Essentials Plus, around things like everyone shares, admin logins, domain admins. I'm going to mention this care cert piece because it is very specific to what goes on within health and social care, particularly NHS, but actually it's a way in which we can show you and demonstrate how we can automate processes within the dashboard. So we'll come on to that now. What goes on with a care cert? These are vulnerabilities that are issued by obviously by vendors and things like that, and they get sucked into an NHS process by what's called NHS Digital. What they then do is they then take those and they issue them as these things called care certs. They're effectively vulnerability alerts for an NHS environment. But the key thing here to bear in mind in any environment is if you've got that going on, how do you then ascertain as to whether that affects you locally? So we're going to come on to wider vulnerability in a second. And what we've done with the dashboard is say, we've got the assets, we've got the information, we know about all the software, we know about versions, etc., etc. And by then applying that and doing a contrasting compare with vulnerabilities, we can very quickly, automatically show you where those vulnerabilities may affect you. So again, in this case, we can trend that information over time, which is becoming more and more important for people. Look at it again month by month. But below that, very quick snapshot. It says we have this particular vulnerability here. You know what it is. We immediately say, well, there aren't any, so it's already resolved. Not found any. These are particular how it's classed from an NHS perspective in terms of risk. And we can see we don't need to bother doing anything. That's wonderful, But if you think about the manual process of what that looks like, a vulnerability is issued. We see them coming out on a frequent basis now. Somebody says their software's got a vulnerability in the back of it. The first question that we need to ask ourselves is, where does that affect us? Where are those vulnerabilities on our network? And how quickly can we get to them? How quickly can we remediate them before something comes and hits us that could be a real problem? And we see lots of stories in the press, sadly, about where organizations have been hit by vulnerabilities or ransomware, etc., and that's a real problem. So I'm hoping that you're kind of starting to see this is about forward planning. We've got other solutions that are in place. Your AV solution is an insurance policy in a sense, because it's saying if these things do come to us from a ransomware attack, it should stop it. And then we could look at something like root cause analysis to see how that entailed and what happened, kind of an EDR kind of approach. This is about forward plan. This is about saying, where are those vulnerabilities in our network? How do we address our resources to fix them quickly? And how do we then make sure that we are then secure? In addition to that, we can add workflow. And again, this is an NHS specific example, but this workflow could be can we take something out of the dashboard and put it into our support desk as an example? Or how do we record things locally? If we have a vulnerability that we can't physically do something about because there is no patch, there is no update for that software, we've got something on a legacy OS and we can't do anything about it, then we can put a local workflow in to say, this is what we do in terms of managing that locally and how we might report that out to a third party if we need to do that, or just keep it locally. We're not talking about spreadsheets anymore. This is all about talking about automated solutions and getting away from that kind of manual process. I did earlier mention global CVEs, and this is a view here which we're talking about global CVEs, i.e. software vulnerabilities by asset. And again, this is kind of listing out to us the software, the vendor, the installed version, how many global CVEs affect that, what is the risk score, and how many installations of that do we have locally in our network. We can look at more information about those particular CVEs, see what they are, see what the individual risk scores are. And again, within a live environment, this is red, amber, green. As you'll see, that's a consistent approach as we step forward onto the next views as well. What we're doing at this point is, and there's a really exciting development coming here, is the ability to diagrammatically represent this. And again, this is forward planning for vulnerabilities and how might they affect you, not how did it affect you, how might it affect you. Therefore, where do we apply our resource to make sure that we deal with those and mitigate those quickly? So maybe we see a vulnerability on a server. That server could downstream be connected to 3,000 PCs as an example. If we deal with a server, we allay the fears straight away. We can then deal with the PCs further down the line, but we've immediately removed that vulnerability up front. So again, focus on that resource, and that's what we're really about, allowing you to address the right resource at the right time to manage these things going forward. So that's kind of covered off vulnerabilities and managing vulnerabilities. We're also looking at hardware vulnerabilities, a little bit more complicated, and that's coming with a very long roadmap of developments, 99% of it fed by our customers. And again, that's important that we keep doing that to make sure we've got everything that we need in there to support you. Patching is a really important part of what goes on within any organization. And we saw, dare I say, things like WannaCry was down to a weakness in a piece of Microsoft stack. So let's make sure we've got a view. Now you might be thinking, well, we've already got tools that do our patching for us. We might be using SCCM or something else. But actually, a lot of those tools that have been used are actually using agents. I said earlier, we're agentless. So what's watching the agents? How are we making sure? One of the things that we do is quite frequently something called WMI, which I'm sure you're familiar with it. Because we're agentless, we do find in many of our deployments that we see that we can't scan devices. And what that very quickly tells us, there's a problem. Is it a connectivity issue? A lot of times WMI is broken. So if WMI is broken, the question we then ask is what else is using WMI within the estate? And is that reporting correctly? So very quickly we get down to a truthful view. So that what this view is showing us here is on the left-hand side here, we've got our desktops trended over time. So we do like those trends. It shows you how your performance is improving, hopefully, and then servers on the right. And again, this red, amber, green approach. Now in this example and out of the box, we have anything if it's green is within 30 days, and if it's amber is between 30 and 90, anything that's in red is over 90 days. Usually we find that desktops are rebooted on a day-to-day basis. Servers are a little bit more difficult to reboot. But again, this can give you a lot of really vital information. You can click through into the device, but also from a risk register point of view, if you've got servers on your estate that have not been rebooted and they're not being rebooted for particular reasons, you can place that onto your risk register to say, this is a real risk for us. We do not want to find ourselves in a position whereby we get hit by something, a vulnerability, and that means that we're down. We can't service the public at large in terms of what we do as an organization. So again, really important. And this is driven directly from Microsoft Security Center. If your parameters around your patching are different, let's say that you're up there with Cyber Essentials Plus and patching within a 14-day cadence, then we'll match those to those colors, to those parameters to make sure they meet your local requirements. So that's how we deal with patching. Though we do have the ability to contrast and compare with SCCM, so correlation can happen there to make sure, again, we can see what the problems are. Why is SCCM saying it's not being patched? Why is the dashboard saying it's not being patched? An example, why is SCCM saying it has been patched? What's the problem there? Let's look into that. And we'll investigate those with you as we kind of travel down the journey together. I mentioned AV earlier, and it's fair to say that any AV solution isn't built for a particular vertical market, whether it be health and social care, local government, healthcare, whatever it may be. they're built for a global market. So there's things in there that aren't going to be in, everything isn't going to be in your central console. So again, particular things about some of the reporting that needs to happen. We brought all of that together. This is a Software Central example, but it could be Microsoft, could be another example. Bringing all that information to one place, but also comparing it with information like computers not being seen. So it's okay to know about what's been detected, what's been cleaned, and what alerts we have here, and what versions we're using, and what components are in date and out of date. But where have we got computers that have not been seen for a certain period of time? Because if they've not been seen on the network, they may not be up to date. So again, gives you a good view on that. And again, this one particular view here around this DSPT piece I mentioned earlier, but again, thinking outside the box, where else do we need to report that information? This is a live feed. So we can now say very quickly, click, here's all the information we need to produce that report. And I mentioned earlier, that very quick way in which that gentleman was able to get, when his boss said, you know, I need a report on this, sitting in a shared governance meeting, and an email went to him and he did it very quickly. That's how quickly we get the information. And then from there, we could drill down if we wanted to find devices that are a certain version or are in a certain department or by domain, etc., etc. So again, really powerful way of getting to that information quickly and answering those questions. Active Directory. Now, this is something that's used by many organizations, but not necessarily looked at and used and trended. So again, this is all around compliance. So where I said earlier about users where we may not have seen them on the network, or they may not be using their computers. Again, why have we got computers that have not been seen in 60, 90 days? What's going on there? Where are they? Failed logons, etc. And then we see things like new users created, new computers found. What are those computers? And why, you know, why they're suddenly connecting to our network? What's going on? We will find domain and non-domain machines. Clearly, the domain machines are going to have more scanning availability because they'll be your devices. But if somebody comes and plugs them into your network, it's non-domain. Again, anything can be alerted on, and we know about that. And then this everyone shares has been a really interesting one, because privileged access management is something that's really high on the agenda. That NCSC report called that one out as well, around making sure that those access levels are accurate and they're managed, and you've not got just, you know, loose domain admins floating about that can just, you know, can log on to things as well. So a really important piece. Below that, some compliance information around AD things. A really interesting one for me is no email address. Thrown AD, no email address, an interesting one, but important to some people. And again, here trending that information over time back to that kind of performance monitoring. How are we doing against the kind of local benchmarks that we've set ourselves? I did mention kind of in the introduction that we can provide views for different parts of the organization, and this is a good example of what that might look like. So you could say, although this is called computer discovery, this might be really useful for those people that manage the desktop environment. So we can see here on the top left our domains. We can see down here more information about those particular devices, those desktops. We've then brought in the AV piece, the ATP piece, the driver encryption piece down the left-hand side. In the middle here, we've got OSs, all our OSs that are on our network, computer chassis, models, etc., etc. And then a much more detailed breakdown of OSs, service packs, versions, and then builds out to date. Interesting story here. We have one customer in the Midlands who had got the dashboard in. They'd had it in for about a year, and they'd given assurances to their senior management they had no XP device on the network. One day they got an alert and one XP device appeared in this list here. They went in, they checked it out, they found out where it was. They found out that eventually that it was a part-time worker who was coming in, connecting the machine, and then disconnecting it and going away. But they very quickly found out. Then it was just a case of just managing that process to find out when that person was in, to get their hands on the machine and make sure that it was brought up to speed. But again, their words, not ours, was if they'd not had the dashboard in place, they wouldn't have found that machine. So that's quite a powerful story, but a very true one nonetheless. I also mentioned earlier we need to take a look at all of the assets. So here we're looking at assets around software. Now, this solution wasn't designed to be a software asset management tool like the Soteros or the Snows of this world, but actually we are finding more and more people are using it for that purpose. And we do have some people now, some customers who have stopped renewing their asset management tool. It can be used as a full-blown asset tool, and you can bring in your licenses. Again, anecdotal story, I chatted to somebody yesterday who said to me that they had a vendor called them and said, we want to come and do a full audit across your estate. And they said, why do you want to do that? We'd only got like 10 licenses of this software. And they said, well, we want to know what you've got. Well, clearly that was an opportunity to kind of charge them more money. And they said, no, we don't need to do that. We'll just run an asset inquiry against what we've got, against the licenses, and we will tell you. Why would they give them access to their network? As I said, it's a bit like saying somebody calls you about a bank transaction and wants to see your entire bank account. You wouldn't do that. You'd actually give them evidence of that transaction. So really, again, really powerful story. They're able to do that very, very quickly from an asset management point of view. And again, we can see here now we're looking at bits of software outside of the Microsoft environment, all of our publishers down the left-hand side. We can then start to look at things like unauthorized software, unrated software, create exception lists for those. Why have we got that piece of software? One that's very pertinent to most people at the moment is Zoom. Everybody's got Zoom on their PCs, I suspect, but actually it's difficult to manage. So again, let's look at the authorized list. And again, we can graph that out and trend that. And then some other interesting areas around maybe software changes or versions of SQL as an etc. To say this can be used as that full-blown asset tool. In the same way, we need to look at our hardware assets. We need to know what they are. And again, here are manufacturers down the left-hand side. And then in the center here, we've got these assets and they're grouped in types. We can create those types. We can create new groups if you've got particular areas of interest around a particular group. They may already be on the system. If it's an asset, it will be. And it could be classified as a PC, let's say. But we want to actually give them another name. It's a particular device type that we want to get into. What I want to do here as I kind of come to close of the demonstrating the live dashboard is show you how we can use it for investigation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate clicking on my switch URL here. That takes me to my switches. I can see my switches here, and I'm interested in a particular switch. And we can drop down to see all the interfaces. Now, again, another interesting story here. I was at a site with a colleague last year, and the customer said, we actually think we may have got a little bit of WannaCry residue on a PC. Now, we knew that this site had got a very, very powerful anti-ransomware tool deployed. So the first question was, let's look for all PCs across the estate with no antivirus on. And we found 6 devices. We then said, okay, what else do we know about this? Can you tell us anything more? And they said, well, actually, we know they're connected to this particular subnet. Okay, let's refine down to the subnet. In the end, after about 2 or 3 minutes of investigation, we found that they had got 3 devices that could be susceptible. They thought they'd only got 1, they got 3. We know exactly which building they were in, which floor they were on, and then where to go from there. So again, really powerful in terms of that investigation piece. We can then drop down to one of these particular PCs, and we can see that PC here earlier, the one we saw earlier, sorry. And again, I want to run through some of these tabs over the top to give you that full view. So we can see everything about the device, warranties, etc., what's going on with it. We can also see all of the software updates, whether they've been effective or not, and what that looks like. We can also look at all of the software on that device by version, by publisher, by install date. And we can also look at the heat maps. When is it on, when is it off, when is it on standby, etc. This and the next view have been used for kind of forensic investigation. We've got members of staff who are on their computer or not their computer at some really weird times. What were they doing? Who was it? And we can then see users on that machine and when they were logged on, etc. There's one up here that I can't show you today, the security review. What we've seen so far is a top-down view, a helicopter view of our estate, grouping it in certain ways. This security view, what we call inside out, allows us to see it at an individual level, and every vulnerability that affects that particular device will be listed in that view. And again, we can then come back up to that top level view. So that's the live dashboard. Just in summary, that's on your network, can be a virtual or a physical server using agentless scanning to bring all the information in and then contrast and compare that with a whole range of issues, vulnerabilities, patch levels, etc., to give you that complete truthful view. Views for different parts of the organization, if you want to do that. And we've even created stakeholder views that are read-only for people that you want to share information with around the estate. I want to now turn to those monthly reports we mentioned earlier. This is a way in which we can kind of provide that independent view. And these reports are designed to be executive facing. You will know how long it takes you to create a report. Any information that's in the dashboard can be taken out in a, let's say, a CSV format and can be put into any type of report. So we'd have some customers who actually take a feed from different places and put it into a BI tool, and they create their own reports as well. But that report that we provide on a monthly basis is there. It comes out automatically. There's no data coming towards it's coming directly off the server. And we've kind of got this top level view here, which is kind of calling out those key things you need to be aware of. And then we go into more detail. And you can see some of the topics here that we cover. And again, trending is really everything that we want to kind of get into this in terms of what that looks like. It's important that you see how that is performing and how that's going. What have I not mentioned? We have MDND integration that gives you more visibility of what goes on with regards to devices within an MDM environment. I've mentioned reports, mentioned most of these things down below here. So again, you'll get a copy of this as a recording as well, so you can study this in your own time. Again, we've got quite a few testimonials. Again, you can see these in your own time. I won't dwell on them, but kind of gives a lot more gravity to the solution. And then back to those case studies as well. And finally, just a quick kind of snapshot of what it looks like. It is subscription based and it's based on an asset limit. We've got customers between 3 and 50,000 assets. We talk about it as a kind of with that solution wrapper that goes with it, and then go from there. The key thing is that last line. We have a free POC. All we need is a server and obviously those connection types to the back end, so we can do those updates. It's free. We're issuing it for 30 days. After 30 days, we have a review with you. And then we create one of those reports. Really, it gives you a great feel, not only for what's going on in your estate, but also have you got any discrepancies? You may have got multiple tools that are giving you different answers. And if you want to then progress, it helps you build a business case as well. If you want to extend it, we can extend that to 60 days. You see from there. But so that's a free POC. It looks like a production environment, and we treat it that way as well. The only thing we don't do is any kind of in-depth tailoring, because we're obviously trying to service paid customers. So hopefully that's been really helpful for you, and you've got something out of that today. If you want to get in contact with us, please do. We will send you an email out to say thank you for joining, and there'll be a copy of the recording in association with that. I'm not sure there's any questions. I can't see it at the moment, so I'll give it a few more seconds to see if anybody's got any questions in there and they want to pick up on. Otherwise, we'll close it down, and hopefully you can fill that survey in for us on the way out. That'd be really helpful as well. Well, I can't see any questions coming up. So again, thank you very much for attending today. Pleasure to have been able to present to you, and hopefully you can fill that survey in and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.